afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Cutter Transportation webcast. Today's topic is public transportation and women's safety, real and perceived concerns. Our presenter today is Ms. Victoria Perk. Let me tell you a little bit about her before I hand today's presentation over to her. Victoria Perk is a senior research associate at Cutter with 25 years of experience in the field of public transportation, consisting of service planning, operation planning, safety, service, survey design, administration analysis, the National Transit Database, performance, measurement, statistical analysis, econometrics, and research. Her recent research has focused on performance evaluation, the use of NTD data, transit safety, and bus rapid transit topics, including land use, property value, impacts. With that being said, Vicki, I'm going to hand the next time over to you. Take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. My study is on public transit and women's safety, and I would like to credit my co-author and former graduate student who assisted greatly with this research, Mr. Vanko Antonov, who during the course of this study was a graduate student in USF's Urban and Regional Planning Program. He has since graduated and moved on, but he was a great help in this study. So as many know, the Federal Transit Administration has emphasized safety as a top priority for transit in the U.S. And with FTA guidance, agencies are implementing safety management systems, or SMS, which comprise a comprehensive framework for addressing transit safety. But either in conjunction with or in addition to SMS, there's still a need to consider the safety and personal security of particular user groups, such as women. So last year, a small study was conducted as part of the National Center for Transit Research. This slide shows the general outline of the report, as well as this presentation. So we provide a little bit of background, some results of some recent literature, some statistics, and some insights from a few of our Florida transit agencies, and some findings. This report is still being finalized, but at some point it will be available on Cutter's website. So quite a large body of research shows that women do have specific safety concerns in public spaces. Going back to the 70s, street harassment was identified as a systemic issue for women in public spaces. Unfortunately, by the time they are teens, many women have learned to simply accept that they need to be careful and always aware of their surroundings in public spaces. And as a woman myself, I can attest that this is definitely true. Going back to my own time as a teen, my first job working at a large shopping mall where I grew up, working late during holiday shopping season. The stores would be open till 11 o'clock at night, and it was always drilled in our heads that be so careful when we walk down into the parking lot because you never know who's out there. You have to travel in groups and look out for one another. And I'm sure this is something that is familiar to any of the women who may be listening. Also, I'm a runner, and as a woman, I have to be careful about where and when I run. And again, I learned very early as a teen, running in the neighborhoods around my school with my cross-country team, being catcalled and harassed and honked at by vehicles with men or boys in them. So I learned pretty early on to deal with things like that. And my husband, being a runner himself, when I asked him, how often do you think about, being careful when you run, or do you worry about people bothering you or harassing you when you run? And his answer was, it never crosses my mind. So just a few anecdotes that I'm sure that some in the audience may be able to relate to. So this slide shows some key recent statistics from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center that are quite sobering. So 1 in 5 women will be raped at some point in their lives. 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted at college, and of course a large number of those assaults go unreported. 63% of sexual assaults are not reported to police, and despite what some people might think, the prevalence of false reporting of these types of incidents is very low, possibly between 2 and 10%. And also relating to the issue of human trafficking, nationally, Florida is ranked as the 3rd highest human trafficking destination. There are certain aspects of the transportation environment that can make a person, especially a woman, feel unsafe. And these include unmaintained pedestrian areas that may have, large bushes or foliage or other things that obstruct people from view. Women in particular, they don't want to be walking or standing where they will be obstructed from public view for long periods of time. That makes them feel unsafe. Lighting, of course, is an issue, obviously at night and around parking areas and structures, bus stops, etc. Women tend to not want to remain for very long periods in isolated areas by themselves, such as isolated bus stops. And, transit vehicles, whether they be very crowded or hardly crowded at all, each of those situations can present an uncomfortable situation for women. Uncomfortably close crowds can be unsettling, and it can make it easy for harassers to get too close. On the other hand, if you're almost by yourself on a transit vehicle or at a transit stop, that can be very unsettling as well. So these safety concerns can truly impact a woman's mobility. Women may often choose to not travel after dark, to travel alone, travel on specific routes or streets, and it can impact their choice to use transit, and it can have them not consider transit be an option if they perceive it is unsafe for them. And I do have one more anecdote to share that I share often because it kind of is flabbergasting to me. As someone in the transit industry, I use transit wherever I go. A couple of years ago, my family and I were visiting our extended family in Cleveland, Ohio. One afternoon, my husband drops me off downtown at an old friend's office so that we could visit and have a late lunch. Afterwards, my friend had to continue working. I was going to go meet my cousins for a happy hour at a restaurant in another part of downtown. So he says to me, just hop on this bus right out here. It'll take you directly west to drop you off almost right in front of your restaurant. I was like, oh, great, thanks. So when I arrived, my cousins, all female, I was like, well, how did you get here? Because they knew that I didn't have a car. I said, oh, I took the bus. You could hear a pin drop. And after hearing the pin drop, there were audible gasps. Oh, my God, you took the bus? That's not safe. Why would you do that? Why didn't you just call us and we would have come to pick you up? So that was pretty surprising to me, their reaction, to hear that these are some women who lived in Cleveland their entire lives, had never stepped foot on a bus in the city, or the county for that matter. And a large part of that reason was because of the safety concerns. So I like to share that example because I think it's fairly instructive when we look at why, choice, people who would have the choice to ride, particularly women, may choose not to. So as we've discussed, there are some specific safety issues, such as the lack of safe access to the transit services and personal security concerns at the stops or stations, on board the vehicles, and even on shared use vehicles such as Uber and Lyft. The important thing is, it doesn't even matter whether these safety concerns are real or just perceived. They still influence women's choices. Perception is reality. And one study found that women weigh factors differently than men when choosing a mode. often prioritizing safety over other characteristics that might influence that mode choice. Another important finding is that it may take only one negative experience using transit for someone to not consider using it again. And this was already discussed a little bit, but the uncomfortable experiences on crowded vehicles as well as unsettling experiences on more empty vehicles can be unsettling and uneasy. On crowded vehicles, when people are very close together, it can make it easy for a harasser to not only harass, but then to escape quickly and allow the behavior to go unrecognized or unchallenged by anyone around them. It's also important to note that these types of safety issues that we've been discussing can affect not just women transit passengers, but also women transit workers. Going back even just a decade ago, several large major transit agencies in the U.S. did not necessarily seem to take these issues very seriously. So without identifying the agencies or the individuals who spoke, here is a selection of a few actual quotes from transit agency spokesmen or transit police spokesmen. And it really isn't a big issue. One person's harassment is another person's flirtation. Oh, this is just one of those odd things that you have to get used to and expect when you live in a big city. And even some victim blaming. You're a pretty girl. What do you expect? So as you might imagine, when some of these quotes got into the media, there was quite a bit of backlash and a few public relations nightmares. And the good thing is that that actually resulted in stronger, more refocused anti-harassment campaigns in some of these cities. And so these next few slides just show some materials from some of these transit agencies. These are some relatively recent anti-harassment campaign materials. This first one is from King County Metro in Seattle. Again, imploring bystanders and other users to report what they see. Here's a few from the MBTA in Boston, which had a campaign in conjunction with the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center. Some of these are very creatively worded. For example, I could tell the way she was looking at me, she wanted me to back her up. So I told the guy harassing her to leave her alone and sent his photo to the T police. Another one from Boston. Obviously, this kind of thing is an issue in large cities where buses and trains can be very crowded. In our research, we came across several statements and testimonials from women who have experienced all manner of harassing incidents. Some very vulgar and disgusting, and things that, we couldn't repeat here in this presentation. Here are a few examples from WMATA in Washington, D.C. Here's a few from Chicago Transit Authority. I like the one where it says, "We are all watching." Many times harassers in these situations are counting on people looking the other way and minding their own business and not wanting to get involved. All right, but campaigns like this that implore people to look out for one another and encourage people to speak up can help to stop that. And here is a few from Edmonton Transit Services in Canada. So in addition to these anti-harassment campaigns, some other solutions include apps that can enhance safety. The technology that we have today everyone having, or pretty much everyone having a smartphone readily available can really help to put a stop to many of these events. Something like NextBus, which its original intention is simply to provide accurate wait time information, can also indirectly enhance transit safety by providing this information as well. There are some apps that relate to the See Something, Say Something campaigns, literally called See and Say or See Say. They allow anonymous reporting of harassment as well as other types of suspicious behavior. There's a screenshot there from the MBTA app from Boston. There's a few outside the U.S. as well. There's one called DigiPolice in Japan that, when activated, will play really loud sounds like, stop it or get away from me. And something called Safety Pin, which is in some other countries, including India and Colombia. That's an app that helps where users can rate the safety of certain places or locations or services, including transportation. Other things that transit agencies can do and have done is to allow flag stops along bus routes. So a flag stop is where a rider will flag down the bus in between its marked stops to either board or alight the vehicle. Now, an agency may choose to do this only on a few routes or in a few locations or at certain times of the day, such as very late at night. And that can help the rider to board or alight much closer to their origin or destination and not have to walk quite as far on their own. And of course, there are things like enhanced lighting, communication, and the presence of security personnel. Okay, so this next section presents some National Transit Database, or NTD data, on transit security, particularly personal security. Now, in the NTD, these types of incidents are referred to as security events. When we say safety in NTD, we're mostly talking about things like accidents and collisions. So what you see listed there are the types of reportable events in personal security: assault, robbery, rape, larceny, theft, homicide, and suicide is also included in there as well. And each of these has its own thresholds and definitions to be reportable in the NTD database. Now, those of you who may be somewhat familiar with NTD may realize it's not perfect. The NTD is not a perfect database. It doesn't capture everything that we would like to see, but it is still very useful, and it is the one thing that we have here in the U.S. for standardized reporting. It is important to note that NTD does not capture harassment incidents that, of course, are not reported and or do not rise to the level of assault. So there's a little bit of data. We looked at data for a period from 2013 to 2017. We looked at the U.S. and then specifically at Florida. So you could see that actually the reported personal security events are actually quite low. The rate is quite low in comparison to the quite large amount of service being provided. So for the country as a whole, approximately 5,800 personal security events, over 14 billion revenue miles of service during that time, and nearly 48 billion passenger trips. For Florida, again, the numbers are quite low, only a total of 54 of these events, and that would be for approximately 30 urban agencies that report in the NTD. And just showing graphically, it's a breakdown of the personal security events for this time period, 2013 to 2017, for the U.S. and Florida. You can see that assaults, of course, make up the largest share of these events. And there we go. And whoops, I accidentally advanced one slide too quick. There we go. These graphics show injuries and fatalities from personal security events for both the U.S. and Florida. And these are the way we categorize the people to whom these security events occurred to in the NTD. So there's obviously passenger, that will be the folks on board the transit vehicles. There's the operator, which is the driver of the vehicle. Of course, they too may be victim of these types of events. Other employees and persons who, what they say, waiting and leaving. What that means is someone who has just gotten off of a transit vehicle and is still in the vicinity on the property of, of the agency, or someone who may be waiting at a transit station or stop or within a facility. To put some numbers to those injuries and fatalities, we were showing percentages on the previous slide, but I think it's important to show that these numbers are very, very low, right? So only about 5,700 injuries in the U.S. and only 43 in Florida for these types of events during this time frame of 2013 to 2017. And as far as fatalities, the numbers are even lower, 430 in the U.S. and only in 7 in Florida, and that's for that, several year period that we looked at. Okay. So again, women may, they don't just fear, being harassed or bothered, but they do fear being victims of these types of crimes as well that are reported in NTD. But as you can see, those types of crimes are occurring at a very, very low rate. And interestingly, when we looked at the gender breakdown of these injuries and fatalities, we could see that, even though we know that the majority of transit riders are women, the majority of the injuries and fatalities due to these events actually accrued to men. And again, we just want to remind everyone that the data in the NTD, do not provide a complete picture of the women's experience on transit, because there are many types of harassment events and incidents that are not going to be captured or reported in any way in the NTD. Another aspect of this study was to reach out to representatives of a few Florida transit agencies to learn more about the experiences of women, both passengers and workers, regarding personal safety. So this was, a very small study. So we didn't have a lot of resources to be able to talk to large numbers of people or conduct our own surveys or focus groups or anything like that, which would be great things to do for extending this research. But we did find that there were 3 agencies that were able to provide information both within our resources and time frame of this study. And they were Palm Tran, which is in the southeast part of the state in Palm Beach County, Votran, further up the east coast in the Daytona Beach area, and Lee Tran on the southwest coast in the Fort Myers area. Now, Palm Tran would be considered kind of a mid-sized agency, however, nationwide, but in Florida, it's definitely one of the larger agencies. Votran and Lee Tran are smaller, and actually, when looking at their ridership numbers, they're almost exact with approximately about the same number of annual passenger trips. So what we learned, the folks at these agencies did acknowledge, that there are issues with harassment, both towards passengers and workers. However, at the time of the study, these things weren't necessarily being tracked in any formal way. They also noted that, harassers are not just men. And sometimes men can be the target of harassment as well. I mean, that's certainly true and came up in our literature. Sometimes it's a woman who is a harasser, or maybe harassing another woman. Some of these agencies have issues with groups of teenagers that board the vehicles and harass other passengers. So their responses to these incidents have generally covered all of these types of harassment. At the smaller agencies, a harasser can often be identified quite easily. It may be a regular passenger that is harassing another passenger, or perhaps a bus operator on a regular basis. With a somewhat low ridership, the operators get to know a lot of the regular passengers. These individuals can often be identified and confronted, maybe even right at the bus stop by a supervisor or someone, and, action can be taken. And as we've already said, it's not just passengers, but the female workers as well, whether an operator or a supervisor or other worker. The types of harassment that some female workers have endured include passengers crowding the operator while driving, standing forward of the line and getting too close and trying to kind of distract the driver. There's been incidents of stalking, staring, groping, unwanted comments and conversation. And agencies typically have a strong customer service focus. The operators are the face of the agency and they want to be friendly with their passengers. But sometimes, that can be taken too far and someone can take advantage of that. And again, any women who are listening may recognize that situation where simply smiling or engaging in simple conversation may have been interpreted as a signal for something different. Also, there's an issue sometimes with the authority of the female bus operator or supervisor. The female supervisor is responding to a scene. Sometimes their authority may not be respected. And in that case, the agency may need to send a male supervisor out as well to help deal with the situation. And of course, that's not an efficient thing to do. So what are these agencies doing? A lot of the similar things that we've talked about already. Technology is a great tool. While the 3 agencies we talked with did not have these apps at the current time, there's a screenshot there of those See and Say apps that links Orlando and JTA in Jacksonville. One of the agencies we talked with was thinking about having some kind of physical way to report, perhaps filling out a little bit of information on a card. And again, these types of things can have a system security focus, which when we talk about system security, we're talking about things like bomb threats, et cetera. But they, of course, can also assist with personal security issues. And of course, these apps can immediately provide a description and photo and GPS location. Often in the apps, they can turn off the flash automatically on the camera, so you can be very discreet when reporting. This can discourage harassers if they know that people are paying attention and can easily and quickly and very discreetly report, right? Sometimes people don't want to get too involved, and like we said before, harassers may count on that. So if people can do something quickly and make a difference, they're more likely to do so. And some other things include better lighting. We're seeing agencies looking into solar lighting. Some isolated bus stops, you may just have a pole with a sign on it. Well, maybe you can replace that pole with something that has a solar light so that at night that area will be illuminated. Operator barriers. are something that we are seeing come up more. Of course, interestingly, with COVID-19, we're seeing different retail stores installing these barriers, so maybe there's some protection regarding viruses as well. However, the main impetus was, of course, to protect the operators from assaults. And actually the photo that's shown there is from a very recent article from one of our local transit agencies in Pinellas County, which is now has their fleet 100% equipped with these barriers. Some agencies are also considering armed security, whereas typically the security is unarmed. Human trafficking discussions have come up, and other types of enhanced training to bring awareness and how to deal with these issues. So from the literature, the traditional transit response to these kinds of incidents has been kind of the same as it has been across society, basically treating this problem as one of individuals rather than society's problem. When we say a problem of individuals, we mean the problem of where women simply need to accept the reality that some guys are going to be jerks and they have to expect it and deal with it. Boys will be boys. But if we want to address this on a societal level, it's to say, that's not good enough. Boys will be boys is not good enough. Boys need to be accountable, and men, of course. And, women shouldn't have to necessarily expect that they're going to be treated this way. Some of the research we found said that, we need to start early, educate the next generation of professionals, at the university level, our planners, our engineers, and transit professionals, so they can go and more forcefully address these issues where they work. One interesting example we found was that when LA Metro opened a new light rail line that was near some other transit service, they had a unique opportunity to survey how their riders' travel patterns may have changed. They didn't expect this, but they found that women only increased their trips only half as much as men, and that 20% of the women avoided the new light rail line due to fear of harassment. And this was a surprise to them. And they've learned that, quote, men should listen to women when they describe their environment. And since then, LA Metro has had several initiatives that are designed to deal with this issue head on. It is true, however, that transit agencies have very limited resources, and so many times, the actions that they will take to improve safety and security will, of course, be targeted to improve the safety and security for all passengers and workers, and of course, that's a great thing. However, these agencies are in a unique position as members of the public, as these public organizations, to address this harassment, not only in responding to incidents that occur on their services, but these agencies, by the nature of their public existence, can act as leaders in the community to help move this needle at a societal level. And of course, again, this was a relatively small study. Did not have a lot of resources to do as much as we would have liked, and so there's lots more that can be done, and future research can include very specific surveys or focus groups to study these attitudes, and research can be conducted on existing and potential strategies for making not only women feel safer, but also other groups as well, whether it be older adults, LGBTQ populations, whatever. Right, so there's a lot more that can be learned and done in this area. And thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Vicki, so much for the great and informative presentation on your extra report, I did just simply want to remind everybody that Vicki's report is still under review, and then as soon as that report is available, we will make sure that the report is posted right under or right near the recording of this webinar. So Vicki, we do have a couple of questions that have come in during your presentation, so let's walk through a couple of them. The first question comes in and says, well, I know there is no national or statewide data. Are you aware of any specific agencies that do collect harassment that is not reportable in NTD?
Yes, and off the top of my head, I can't remember which ones. However, it came across in our research, and I think it is outlined in the report, that there are some larger agencies that have started also internally tracking that information. Okay. And to the extent they can, because as we also discussed, sometimes these things aren't reported. Some of the testimonials from the women who experienced these types of events said, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I just wanted it to stop, or I wanted to get away from there. And so they never told anyone. But to the extent possible, yes, some agencies are trying to collect and track these data.
And have you noticed that any of these agencies have reported less incidents because of some of their mitigation strategies that they're using?
I think that the agencies do feel like it's making a difference. However, I'm not sure that we can have any definitive data to say that quite yet.
Okay. The next question that comes in and says, do you have suggestions or supporting data that agencies may be able to use to help them propose funding, be invested in lighting and or other stops or shelter improvements to improve the feeling of safety or security?
I definitely think that there is some data out there. I know in particular the LA Metro study, they seem to find a definite relationship between safety and ridership. They were able to tell from surveying folks that there were people that were specifically not riding because of safety concerns who would have liked to have taken the transit. So there is some data out there. And I think there's a lot more options now for, cost effectively putting in lighting. I mean, a lot of these companies that are doing the solar lighting seems very promising, and we've seen a lot of agencies in Florida starting to put up some of these types of things.
Okay. This next question is sort of a two-part question. It says, how many transit agencies currently report to NTD, and then what are the thresholds for reporting events in NTD?
All right, so the National Transit Database is really the only folks who are going to report there are those, or at least for the data that we collected, are urban agencies that receive the FTA Section 5307 Urbanized Area Funds. And currently that's approximately 850 transit service providers. The thresholds for reporting, the data that was presented here are major personal security events as reported in NTD. So they have major and they have non-major. So major events, there are specific thresholds. So again, this is why not everything gets counted. If it has to meet at least one of these thresholds. If there's a death, then that's automatically in there. If there's at least one injury that requires immediate medical attention away from the scene, then that gets counted. Property damage in excess of $25,000 gets counted. Evacuations due to imminent danger, quote unquote, is counted. And also mainline derailments, but that doesn't really have that much to do with personal security.
Okay, and I know you mentioned that the data is 5307. Do you know, and I know there is a rural national transit database. Do you know if the strategies are that you've sort of outlined in this report would also be sort of scalable for smaller agencies as well in rural communities?
I think absolutely, because, particularly, we talked about how there can be safety concerns whether, a vehicle is very crowded, but also there can be safety concerns if there's not a lot of people around either. So in smaller areas, and there are some fixed route services that are classified as rural for NTD purposes, these small agencies, they may benefit too from implementing some of these strategies to attract more ridership.
Okay, and then we just have a couple more questions. If you do have any questions, please make sure you do submit them. The next question says, why do you think Florida has such a prominent human trafficking issue compared to the rest of the nation?
That is a good question. I mean, first of all, I'll be honest and say that I'm not an expert in that area at all, and I haven't studied human trafficking that much. However, from what I can tell, we have a lot of international travel. A lot of people can come through here from various places all around the world. I know that large events, sporting events, I know the Super Bowl tends to be held in a warmer climate, often in Florida, and there's all kinds of increased risk and incidents of human trafficking during things like that as well.
Okay. Next question, we'll sort of hit on this because, in our current state with COVID-19 and its effect on transit with the decreased ridership in terms of for social distancing and agencies reducing their services, how do you think that COVID-19 will have an effect on personal security in transit?
Oh, wow. So that's pretty interesting. Some of us within my team have been talking about this. Some people seem to think there's going to be a new normal and nobody's going to want to get within 6 feet of any other person again for the rest of their lives. And that, this can spell doom for transit. However, humans are social creatures and we have short memories. I think, fortunately or unfortunately at some point, things are going to kind of go back to the way they were. And particularly in large, dense urban areas, transit is still going to need to operate and it's going to have a lot of riders. And, we still may have crowded vehicles once again in those areas in particular. And I think too, perhaps agencies, just like our stores and things like that right now, they're making a big effort to say, oh, we're, cleaning all the time and we're putting in barriers and we're doing this and that. I used a self-checkout at the store the other day when I was getting just a couple of supplies, and immediately as soon as I left, the lady was there spraying everything down. So, agencies may need to communicate to the public the actions that they are taking to keep the vehicles safe and clean and sanitized, and, what other measures they are taking so that people can feel confident that they will be able to use the services safely.
Okay. And the next question comes in and says, I noticed that you used some of the statistics from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. What year were those statistics from?
Those statistics are relatively recent. They were from 2015.
Okay. And then the last question that I have here, it says, is there similar issues on van pools operated by transit agencies?
We didn't really look into the van pool mode very much. That would be interesting to take a look at. It was not included in the modes that we looked at for the data that was presented in the report. That was for a bus and rail modes, except for commuter rail, which is not reported in NTD. So that would, that would be interesting. I think with Vanpool, you've got, you don't necessarily have a bunch of different random strangers that are getting together to ride all the time. I mean, they may be strangers in the beginning, but it tends to be a group of folks. So that would be something good to research a little bit more.
Thank you, Vicki. Go ahead.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I just add one more thing? And then just thought of that too. We are seeing some, and hearing of some concerns with other shared use services such as Uber and Lyft. So it may be true that people may be a little, concerned to join a Vanpool if they are concerned about other types of shared use services as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Vicki. I'm going to open up the evaluation on your end. If you could just take a few moments to complete that evaluation, because the feedback provided is not only important to our presenter, but to the entire webcast series. Our next Cutter Transportation webcast is scheduled for next Thursday, presented by one of our researchers, Dr. Pei-Sung Lin, and he will be speaking about his next that specifically focused on campus automated shuttle service, a deployment initiative. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you in a week. Thank you.